Welcome to session 3 on our journey through the whole topic of identity, discovering who we are, discovering what it is God has made us for, and getting on that whole journey of having our inner selves reshaped by the Holy Spirit so that we can become everything that we were created to be. I want to talk a little bit in this session, first of all, about value, and then to explore a little more the whole idea of being created in the image of God. So first of all, let's just get to the whole thing about value. Understanding and living in our true identity must start with understanding and revelation about our value. If we don't believe God values us, then we won't take God seriously. If we don't believe we have value, then we won't take ourselves seriously. With no sense of value, our lives become devoid of purpose and meaning. Ultimately, in our own eyes, we become worthless. This feeling of worthlessness is at the root of much of our depression and insecurity. We don't treat ourselves with respect because nobody else treats us that way. Now, value is very, very important. The question is, where do we get our value from? And that's the question I want to answer, particularly in this section, because very often we put our value in what other people say. We put our value in things that, this whole obsession with owning stuff and, the whole career mentality of, I need a bigger house and a bigger car and a better job and more money and, better holidays and, better clothes and all of those, better, because somehow that makes us feel more valuable. Or for others, it might be, I need to have friends, I need to have relationships, I need to and I feed off those things. And sometimes, people can treat us badly in those relationships, but we keep coming back for it because that's where, funnily, crazily, we find our value. And so where we find our value is very important. And of course, I want to suggest to you in this session that our value is found in God, that what he says is what's most important. And that's what we ought to be relying on. We ought to be understanding and relying upon. Let me just read you something that I came across recently. This article was on unheard.com, and Unheard, their whole raison d'etre is to bring to our attention things from the news that get too easily missed. And this is an article, or part of an article, that I found on there. British school children are having an existential crisis. You might have missed it, but a huge global survey by the OECD of 15-year-olds across 79 countries was published last week. So this was in late 2019, in which UK young people placed second to last in the world in what they call the Meaning of Life Index. That's right. Of all the teenagers on the planet, ours are among the least likely to agree with the idea that my life has clear meaning or purpose. And yet, this unsettling news was pretty much ignored. The focus of the media was on the survey's news about modest improvements in reading and maths. The meaning of life stuff was left well alone. The same survey suggested that the UK's young people, while being in the middle of the pack in terms of happiness, also rank near the very bottom in terms of life satisfaction. Of all the countries surveyed, only the children of Turkey and the Macau region of China rate their lives less highly than the British do. Our teenagers have no sense of their own value, and that's manifest in their lack of sense of meaning in life, and all of the things that we just saw in that article speak to a lack of a sense of value, that I am not important, that I don't count. Because if I'm not important and if I don't count, if I'm not loved just for who I am, then I have to do something to be loved. I have to do something to be accepted. I have to be a certain way. I have to, do things that actually raise my profile, increase my status, that get me to a place where, for whatever it is, and I'm generally really desperate to get there, that people will at least appear to like me, appear to love me, and want to have me around and want to listen to what I have to say, and all of those sorts of things. That all is driven by a lack of a sense of real value. And so we must begin to understand something of our own value, and the place where we really understand that is in understanding what God has to say about us. That God himself, through his word, says some things about who we are, about where and why we're here, where we've come from, why we're here, about our true worth. And ultimately, of course, we see our worth in the cross, that Jesus would have gone to the cross for you if you were the only person alive, if you were the only person who had ever sinned. Jesus would have done all of that for you. And that is one place where we will find our value. But there is much more than that. There is a greater depth to that. I mean, that for us will lead us to a greater understanding of just how magnificently valuable we are, but we only find that when we understand what God has to say about us. It's one thing to understand the words and know what they mean. It's another thing to have revelation. So when we are reading our Bible, we need to be asking the Holy Spirit for revelation. When we are considering what God says, we need to go beyond just understanding the words and understanding what that means for us, discovering the life in it that changes us, that brings us life, and that helps us to discover more about God and about who we are. So I want to just spend a little while thinking about that whole concept again of the image of God in us and what the Bible has to say about that. Let me read to you from Genesis chapter 1, and at verse 26, it says this: Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. What does this mean? What does it mean to be created in the image of God? Let's just have a look about where that passage sits and some of the things that we can see from that passage and where it sits. So the first thing is this: humankind is set apart from the previous acts of creation. So there's all sorts of creative work going on. You can take the time to read those preceding verses for yourselves. But there's the creation of the planet and the plants and the mountains and the seas and the animals and on all of this incredible stuff going on. But when it comes to mankind is created in the image of God. So God, it seems, has a plan for the rest of the stuff that he has created. But it's not the same as his plan for mankind. That you and I are created in the image of God. The animals are not created in the image of God. They may display his glory and his creativity in all sorts of ways, but they're not created in his image. The mountains and the seas are not created in his image. The forests, are not created in his image. They might say something about God. They might display something of his glory. There might be something incredible about that holds us in awe and wonder at the God who created it. But they are not created in his image. They are not created after his likeness. It is only mankind who is created after his likeness. Every other creature is made according to its own kind. The creation of humankind specifically notes that the man and the woman were not made according to their own kind. Rather, they were made in God's image. They're not merely like themselves, So we do bear resemblances to one another, but we're not just like ourselves, but we are also like God, created in the likeness of God, and we share a likeness to him. There is something in us. There is something which is a part of us, and it might be buried under all sorts of things, and we might have to do some work to get to it. But there is something in us which is in the likeness of God, that is in the goodness of God, that is there for the display of his glory in us, which exists in no other element of the creation. It only exists in human beings. We are the ones created after his likeness, and it is in each of us that we are born into that we as we are created in our mother's wombs, and more about that later, but as we're created in our mother's wombs, we are created in the likeness of God, and that is unique, and that is wonderful, and that has a value all of its own. I want to note the fact that it says that male and female, he created them. That here in this passage, we find God specifically talking about male and female. And I want to suggest that actually that is a created order, that there is not that, the male before the female, so is more important. So I'm not on that line at all. I don't believe that. But I do believe that here there is an addressing of gender issues, that actually we're created male and female, and there isn't kind of varieties of that. It's male and female, and I think the rest of the Bible supports that argument. And I don't want to say any more than that, because I don't want to unnecessarily offend or isolate anybody, or turn them off this journey of discovering our identity. But I think there is something significant in that being said. Then, following that, God says, let them have dominion. So it's only humanity that's been given dominion in God's creation. Being given dominion means actually the planet is ours. Having dominion means that we get to enjoy it. We get to rule, if you like, over this planet. But it also means that we have a responsibility for it. And that all is given to humankind. That is all given to human beings and to no other element of the creation. So not only are we created after the likeness of God, but we are given some godly attributes of ownership and responsibility and leadership and caretaking for the planet that he has created. He puts us in that place, which actually puts us in a very significant place and actually gives us a very significant value. And so you can see here that mankind is not just a bolt-on, that mankind is not just an addition to the creating of animals and all of that kind of thing, that mankind actually is created different to the animals, separate from them. I would want to say above them in that sense, that we're created after the likeness of God, that there is something unique to that which exists in each one of us, and that we are given a role and a responsibility and a purpose which is not given anywhere else, that humankind is given that. And I want to say that is all humankind. That is the whole of humankind. It's not just Adam and Eve who carry this. It's not, it's not just the leaders and the politicians or whoever else who make the rules and make the decisions who carry this. But actually, every human being is created in the likeness of God and is gifted with this responsibility and this ownership and this dominion over everything else that is on our earth. It begs the question, how are we like God? And that's not such an easy question to answer, but I do want to suggest that we should be reflecting, because we're in his likeness, part of his nature, his character, we should be reflecting his way of thinking and his way of doing things, and we should be reflecting something of his glory. Now, glory is a word that crops up a lot, that people have some very strange ideas about. I remember when in my early years as a Christian, I was reading these things. When I thought about glory, I thought about something kind of bright and shining, and maybe it's covered in gold, and it has the reflection of the light of the brightest light of the sun in it. And it was, my idea of glory was kind of a bit like that. But then I read that Moses says to God, asks of God, "Will you show me your glory?" And it says that God hides Moses in a cleft in the rock to keep him safe, and that and now remember, what is God doing here? God is showing Moses his glory. It says that all of the goodness of God passed before him. All of the goodness of God passed before him. And so it seems clear from that the glory of God is the goodness of God. That if we are to reflect the image of God, that there should be some goodness that comes out of that, some kindness, some helpfulness, some grace, some mercy, some faithfulness, some generosity. The reflection of God, the God in us. The bit of us that is shaped like him, if you like, should be issuing in all of those sorts of things. That goodness that is God. And so again, mankind is the only recipient of that we are created in his image in order that his glory can be evident in our lives. And everything that is good and noble and right and to be celebrated about human beings, I want to suggest that comes from that image of God in us. And that each one of us is blessed with that. Now listen, I said earlier that might have got buried through one reason or another. And I know that some of us might struggle to see that in ourselves, or we might struggle to see that in others because there are other things that have buried that. And we're going to work through some of that stuff. But, every now and again it creeps out, doesn't it? Every now and again we instinctively do something which is right, which is good, which is helpful, which is loving, which is kind, which is gracious, which is merciful, which is faithful. Every now and again something creeps out which reflects part of that image of God in us, the image that we were created in. And that really is the kind of the essence of where I wanted to go with this part of this session, is that remembering that we are valued, that we have incredible value, not least reason, and I'm going to give you more reasons, but not least reason being that we are created by God in his image and given things that no other element of creation is given. And that image in us, can be seen and can to some degree be measured, can be quantified because it expresses something of God, because the glory of God creeps out of us because of the image of God within us. And that can be seen, and that is the prerogative of every human being, that we are each created in his image. We each have that glory of God in us, and because of that alone, we are incredibly valuable. We are incredibly valuable, but there is more. And that's coming in the next session.